Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar where we celebrate the 23rd anniversary of the Olmstead Decision with a discussion on how blended, braided, or sequenced funding can help drive employment equity and inclusion. This is the second in a series of webinars on blending and braiding and sequencing. The first webinar in March of this year featured 2 states and 1 local area, and it's available in recorded form. Today, we will focus on the great state of Maryland. My name is Vince Kohler, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the LEAD Center, the Center for Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. We're a WIOA Policy Development Center for the Office of Disability Employment Policy. The LEAD Center is operated in collaboration between Social Policy Research Associates and the National Disability Institute. Together, we facilitate the adoption and integration of inclusive WIOA programs, policies, and practices through research, technical assistance, and demonstration projects. We're delighted that you've joined us today for a webinar where you will get some real-life examples from a range of perspectives. We have a full house today, several hundred participants, and they're still filing in. But before we go further, let's conduct some brief housekeeping. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Well, that's me. I'm your moderator for today. I'm a senior strategist at Social Policy Research Associates and with the LEAD Center team. Next slide, please. To ensure everyone can participate fully in today's webinar, we would like to take a moment to share some captioning and housekeeping tips. Today's webinar is live captioned, and the captions appear below the slide deck. You also have the option to open the captioning webpage in a web browser, and the links have been posted in the chat, or a colleague of mine will post them momentarily. Once the captioning window opens on your own system, you can adjust the background color, the text color, the fonts using the drop-down menus at the top of the browser and so forth. We suggest you position the window to sit right on top of the embedded captioning to allow you to see the screen itself. Next slide, please. We really encourage you to ask any questions that you might have about the content we cover today as they occur to you. At any point, you can click the Q&A button that's located on the webinar's menu bar, and this will bring up a Q&A panel or a window into which you can type questions for our presenters, and we'll save some time at the end for questions and answers. If you're experiencing any technical issues or have questions for the technical support team, click the raise hand button that's on the menu bar and we'll respond to you directly. Next slide, please. Now, to kick things off for today, I'd like to say hello to Assistant Secretary of Labor for Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor, Ms. Taryn Mackenzie Williams. Ms. Williams advises the Secretary of Labor on how the department's policies and programs impact the employment of people with disabilities and leads the Office of Disability Employment Policy, also known as ODEP. Ms. Williams.
Great, thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to the second webinar on blending, braiding, and sequencing. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. As you heard, I'm Taryn Williams. I serve as the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Disability Employment Policy here at the U.S. Department of Labor, and also head up the Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP for short. For those of you who don't know, ODEP is a sub-cabinet level agency within the Department of Labor. We were established by Congress 21 years ago to create a federal agency dedicated to working across policies, programs, and agencies to promote disability employment. And it is our mission to develop and influence policies and practices that increase both the number and quality of employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And that is a mission that I care about deeply, and I know all of you who are joining us today care about as well. Under this administration, one of ODEP's major priorities is to increase competitive integrated employment for individuals with disabilities, allowing them to participate fully in their communities. And today's webinar will help provide strategies to further that goal. I want to thank the Lead Center for their collaboration and all of our agency partners in the White House work group on blending, braiding, and sequencing for their help in putting this webinar together. It has been a truly collaborative team effort. Today, in addition to spreading the word about blending, braiding, and sequencing, we are also celebrating the recent anniversary of the Olmstead Decision, which the United States Supreme Court handed down 23 years ago this month. This landmark case was brought by plaintiffs Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson, individuals with significant disabilities who lived in an institution in Georgia. Mental health professionals determined Lois and Elaine could be released, but after several years, they remained in the institution involuntarily. They sued Tommy Olmstead, the then commissioner of the Georgia Department of Human Resources, because they wanted to choose how they spent their days. Financing of needed community services was a critical component to achieving their request and their goal. Elaine and Lois used federal law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, to win their release and to integrate into their communities. And today, 23 years after that Supreme Court Olmstead decision, we recognize that effectively leveraging funding and services across multiple state systems is essential for people with significant disabilities. The opportunity to fully participate in their communities comes when we have that type of leveraging of funding. And this can include leveraging and coordinating funding and services across systems such as Medicaid, vocational rehabilitation, mental health, education, and others through blending, braiding, and sequencing to help achieve competitive integrated employment. I so look forward to hearing about the work that Maryland is doing to expand access to critical services that support people with disabilities across their state by working across systems to expand access to CIE. And again, I thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'll hand it back over to the Lead Center, who will help us get started. Thanks so much.
And thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Williams. So glad to have you here today. And that's Assistant Secretary Williams mentioned, today we'll share how governance and strategic thinking, vision and ambassadorship lead to collaboration between state and local boards and partners. So next slide, please. We will hear how state behavioral health and vocational rehabilitation agencies braid funds for supported employment and how multiple local programs partner and braid funds through integrated resource teams. We'll also hear how local VR and employment networks sequence resources and how strong partnerships can be sustained among multiple agencies at the state and at the local level. Next slide, please. As the webinar title suggests, we're covering 3 strategies of bringing multiple funding streams together to support individuals with disabilities as they pursue customized integrated employment. From left to right, we are going to hear examples of blended funding, where multiple funding streams combine dollars to create a single pot of dollars to purchase services for customers. In this approach, funding from each program loses its program-specific identity And typically this requires explicit authorization by statute or regulation that allows the blending of funds. In the middle, colorfully represented by a braid, multiple funding streams separately and simultaneously purchase and provide services for customers. This requires interagency coordination and collaboration with the goal of delivering more comprehensive services for participants. In this case, the funds do not lose the identity of their original funding stream. And then on the right, with an image of the baton being passed in a relay race, is the sequenced approach, where services supported by different funding streams are arranged sequentially rather than simultaneously. Of course, this requires interagency coordination and collaboration, for example, to ensure that there are no unplanned gaps in necessary services and so that the proverbial baton never gets dropped. So much about the theory. Now let's take a look about how this works in the real world. Next slide, please. The real world is represented today by the great state of Maryland. We're focusing on Maryland for a reason. They have learned a thing or two over the years about blending and braiding. And when we heard about it, we thought you guys should know about this too. You'll hear about some of the strategic choices the state has made at the Workforce Board, at the Division of Rehabilitation Services, and you'll hear also how that's allowed program implementation to flourish at the local level. We're delighted to have with us today 4 leading policymakers and practitioners from Maryland. We'll hear from each in turn. Starting from left to right, we have with us today Mike DiGiacomo, the Executive Director of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, the chief policymaking body for workforce development in Maryland. The board serves as ambassadors for Maryland's business community and further advises Governor Hogan and the workforce system on the workforce development and training needs of Maryland's businesses. Next to Mike, we have Stacy Seymour, who serves as Director of Statewide Employment Initiatives for Maryland's public behavioral health system under the Maryland Employment Network. In her current role, she provides statewide leadership, strategic direction, technical assistance, and oversight of supported employment services, along with other benefits and employment initiatives. Next to her is Kate Drake. She is Community Rehabilitation Program Staff Specialist at the Maryland Division of Rehabilitation Services, where she is responsible for the development and the implementation of continuing program for the establishment, improvement, and use of community rehabilitation programs. And finally, last but not least, we have Lisa Dunaway, the Manager for Youth and Young Adult Services and the Ticket to Work Coordinator at Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation. From her, we will hear how the Workforce Development Corporation braids and blends resources to better assist the individuals enrolled in their workforce employment network. So next slide, please. We're going to go to Mike first. And Mike, why don't you tell us about how the State Workforce Development Board is using the benchmark of success framework to guide the partnership?
Well, thank you very much and good afternoon. My name is Mike DiGiacomo, Executive Director for the Governor's Workforce Development Board in Maryland. The board is the strategic arm of workforce development for the state and consists of 58 members, including the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Disabilities and the Assistant Superintendent for the Maryland Department of Rehabilitation Services, also known as DOORS. The board has oversight for 13 local workforce boards and American Job Centers. The board and partners serve as ambassadors and connectors for the workforce system, sharing information with their local area or industry groups. And the mission of the board is to guide a nationally recognized workforce development system that aligns with economic and educational goals for the state of Maryland. Next slide, please. Under Governor Hogan's leadership, Maryland's workforce system launched the Benchmarks of Success as a framework for guiding partners in working towards the shared goals and activities of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity System, also known as WIOA. The benchmarks of success allows partners to think systematically about how workforce services are delivered, whether services are reaching priority populations, where to eliminate gaps to create a more efficient, effective system, and how to build a more prepared, responsive workforce for Maryland's businesses. The 5 benchmarked goals are to increase the earning capability of Maryland workforce system customers by maximizing their access to employment, skills and credentialing, life management skills, eliminating barriers to employment to strengthen and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of Maryland's workforce system. Next slide, please. To accomplish these lofty goals, an executive committee was established to provide oversight. The committee consisted of secretary-level participation from the Maryland Department of Labor, the Governor's Workforce Development Board, the Maryland Department of Commerce, the Maryland State Department of Education, Division of Rehabilitation Services, the Maryland Department of Human Services, and other local community workforce development partners. One of the key provisions of WIOA is the formulation of a memorandum of understanding and resource sharing agreement. These documents serve as the roadmap for a local area regarding how it will deliver services, refer customers, and share common operating and infrastructure costs. The committee and the Governor's Workforce Development Board approved a policy that the MOU and RSA for the local area would be an umbrella agreement that promotes transparency and collaboration between the partners who make up a local workforce system, and requiring all partners in a local area to contribute to the infrastructure costs of the American job centers. In the event negotiations broke down at the local level, information was gathered and brought before the committee to provide recommended solutions. Next slide, please. In 2017, the Maryland Department of Labor established a benchmarks WIOA alignment group that meets monthly and includes representatives from each of the various agencies, partners, and local workforce boards to help develop policy, facilitate communication, collaboration, and coordination with each of their staff. This group makes policy and provides the vision necessary to make sure the Maryland workforce system is working efficiently and effectively between partners. When a partner raises a question of how to deliver services at the local area, the issue is elevated to the alignment group for resolution. Additionally, the benchmarks also established several subcommittees to make recommendations to the WIOA alignment group on specific areas. The subcommittee focuses on the areas of data, policy, professional development, technical assistance, and communication to share relevant information and news with all partner agency staff. The benchmarks provide a clear vision for Maryland's workforce system to meet its commitment to serve its businesses and job seekers alike. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this introduction. If you have questions for Mike specifically, or any of the speakers, don't hesitate to post them in the Q&A. I also wanted to mention that the memorandum of understanding that Mike mentioned is in our resources. So toward the end, you'll see a link to it so that you could pull it up and see how that might be useful if your state is considering such a thing. So thanks again. Now, if we could go to the next slide, we'll hear about how braiding through the Maryland Employment Network is working and what has been done there with our guides, Stacy Seymour and Kate Drake. So take it away, Stacy.
Thanks, Vince.
Okay.
For the next few minutes, Stacy and I are going to talk to you about the Maryland braided funding for behavioral health supported employment. Next slide. So in Maryland, we have 4 partners, the Behavioral Health Administration, the Division of Rehabilitation Services, the local Behavioral Health Authority, our core service agency, and they're responsible for approving the authorizations for services on the BHA side, and then the Administrative Services Organization. Next slide. So implementation, DOORS and Maryland Division of Rehabilitation Services and the Behavioral Health Administration have a long-standing history of a shared vision and value for employment for individuals with serious mental illness. To establish our partnership, we have a memorandum of understanding. This memorandum has been in place for over 20 years. And within the memorandum, it outlines the funding and affirms the funding, our braided mechanism for supported employment. Next slide, please.
So there are a few things that were sort of kept in mind. These are some key policy decisions that were involved in kind of the setup and ongoing collaboration. So the Division of Rehabilitation Services decided to grant deemed status approval for supported employment programs that were licensed by Maryland Department of Health, Behavioral Health Administration. That was a big step in the right direction. So the Behavioral Health Administration also required referral to DOORS for supported employment in order to leverage funding from both entities for individuals that are receiving services in the public behavioral health system. So while the vocational rehabilitation services aren't mandatory, in order to receive supported employment through the public behavioral health system, it comes more of as a package deal than an opt-out situation in exceptional circumstances. So also the Behavioral Health Administration decided to direct supported employment funding exclusively to competitive integrated employment, not agency sponsored employment. And DOORS and the Behavioral Health Administration have worked very hard over the years to align those requirements for competitive integrated employment, so that if it's considered competitive integrated employment by one agency, it also counts for the other. Next slide, please.
So key features of our service design, we leverage 3 funding sources: Medicaid through the MA rehabilitation option, state general funds to BHA through legislative appropriation, and DOORS vocational rehabilitation funds from the Rehabilitation Services Administration. Next slide. So some of the key features of our service design, and I think that these key features make it very unique in many ways. We have a single point of entry. So someone can come for services either through our behavioral health providers or through DOORS. The DOORS application is embedded in the ASO system. So when a provider is referring someone to DOORS, within that process, they are completing the DOORS application. Our counselors have access into the ASO for rehabilitation and treatment information. This works because as the consumer is being referred to DOORS, they sign an ROI, which grants the DOORS counselor permission to access their information. Having this access to the ASO really does streamline and expedite for DOORS the eligibility and order of selection decisions because the information is available for them as the referral is made. Next slide, please. So additionally, it's really seamless to the provider and transparent to the consumer. We provide referral to and funding for individualized benefits planning services for all Social Security beneficiaries receiving supported employment, and that is provided by DOORS. We have enhanced funding for providers of individual placement and support, or rather the IPS system in supported employment, and that's based on a fidelity, which is a proxy for outcomes. Next slide, please.
So this slide really outlines what it looks like. You can really see how braided our funding is. You'll see on the left, those are the services that are funded under the Public Behavioral Health System, or BHA, and on the right side, those services which are funded by doors. And as you can see, they really pull together and go back and forth. A couple things just to kind of mention as we go through this, we'll just give you the brief rundown around what this looks like. This is all behind the scenes information. This isn't necessarily what the individual receiving services sees. They see their work collaboratively with the provider and the doors counselor. So pre-placement, that's really your basic assessment of vocational skills, support needs, interests, benefits education, talking about disclosure. This also includes the referral to doors through the ASO platform.
And job development prep it can be the first service somebody receives from doors. And this is a pre-job development service where somebody has an opportunity to refine their resume, work on a cover letter, practice some interviewing skills. And then job development is an interviewing assistance is exactly what it says. It's the boots on the ground services required to assist somebody to get a job. An interviewing assistance is a set aside billing opportunity for a provider to who either takes somebody to or from an interview or assist them in an interview.
So job placement, that's really when the individual secures the job. That covers the negotiation with the employer, discussion around accommodations, et cetera.
And intensive job coaching is exactly that. It is the intensive services. Doors uses a fading schedule to look at the amount of hours and funding that's required. In general, we consider somebody stabilized at or around 45 days.
So the extended support or ongoing support services, these are those time unlimited long-term supports. In Maryland, our folks have access to long-term supports for as long as they need and want the service in order to assist with maintaining and advancing in employment. Not mentioned on this as well is that once an individual is closed with doors, they may access ongoing benefits counseling services through Social Security's Ticket to Work program via the Behavioral Health Administration's Administrative Employment Network, which has established relationships with supported employment providers. Additionally, the Employment Network, it serves as a step-down service for individuals who may no longer need the level of support that would be offered through those extended support services. Next slide, please.
This is
collaborative work and challenges. This is really an ongoing process. We're always in the process of reviewing and developing the MOU. We have collaborative meetings. We're working through some right now to talk about any updates and make sure that both organizations, agencies are on the same page. We do have regular leadership meetings between doors and BHA leadership. It's a regular check-in, talking about upcoming challenges, new developments, planned future activities or initiatives accordingly. We're also at the moment, we also have, given that the counselors, the doors counselors work out of this platform as well. So it's essential to ensure that smooth referral of individuals to doors via that integrated ASO platform. The collaborative onboarding of newly licensed supported employment providers. Kate and I work very closely together to meet with all newly licensed providers to talk about the logistics, services, service provision, funding. We introduce them to the local vocational rehabilitation teams at their local doors office. We provide joint technical assistance and training. All the training and technical assistance, which is offered to providers, is also offered to the doors counselors to ensure that they're all on the same page. And so anything that we offer, we provide to both the doors counselors as well as the supported employment providers. Next slide, please.
So some of the challenges that we face on a daily basis are the balancing of different and changing systemic regulatory requirements, Programmatic financial stability is heavily influenced by successful employment outcomes. And this can be really challenging for a new provider, and they're trying to balance, making money and getting people placed. And it's really when they have the people working that they start to make the money. So it takes a minute to get there. Accreditation options result in varying levels of understanding and supported employment. Stacy and I have seen over the last few years that depending how an agency is credited, if they're accredited by JCO or they're accredited by CARF, they may have more or less understanding of what supported employment really looks like. And then the braided funding mechanism that we went over a couple slides ago, while it looks simplistic, it can be complex. And it's really kind of a struggle, I think, for some new providers to navigate. And when Stacy and I onboard our providers, we spend quite a bit of time talking about this with them, and still in their beginning phases of implementation, we get a lot of questions about, is this a DOORS or is this a Optum? Who is our ASO? Is this a DOORS or an Optum kind of bill? So these are some of the ongoing challenges. Next slide.
So in terms of sustainability, our funding safety net, if for any reason VR dollars are unavailable at a particular time or for a particular individual, the Behavioral Health Administration does provide some funding for intensive job coaching services to sort of fill in that gap. I mentioned already a little bit about the Ticket to Work program, and the Behavioral Health Administration's Employment Network, which is the Maryland Employment Network, engages a Partnership Plus agreement with the Division of Rehabilitation Services, providing employment and benefit support beyond what's available through DOORS and the Public Behavioral Health Administration. In that ongoing communication between DOORS and BHA as new developments arise and change the landscape, there's ongoing communication and collaboration as policies change and processes change in order to make sure that we're effectively delivering that to the providers. Next slide, please.
So a couple of the major lessons we've learned. Relationships are key. Implementing a process like this or a funding framework is really requires buy-in from the top down. And for the Maryland Division of Rehabilitation Services and the Behavioral Health Administration, we have been able to really maintain that relationship for, like we said before, about 20 years. So the value has to be at the top. And then we have roles dedicated across agencies to support employment, for supported employment collaboration. And these roles are like Stacy and myself. We meet often and we engage in a lot of activities that, bolster the supported employment collaboration. We also, have other people that work behind the scenes as well. And these meetings that we hold with our leadership teams are vital in making sure the roles maintain dedication to the collaboration and making sure that as people go and people come, we have people in places that can bring those people up to speed and keep the relationship fresh. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Kate and Stacy, for this rapid tour through your world. Much appreciated. We had a little bit of audio clipping, so I hope you got most of the audience got the gist of what was said between what was in the slides. Just want to mention also, as you have questions, and we have had a very lively dialogue in the chat, please put them in the Q&A if it's a question to our presenters. If it's a technical question, by all means, put them in the chat. And I'm sure you've seen that come through. We'll probably do a little bit of ABCs at the end as well to decrypt all the acronyms that we may or may not know about. So, but again, thanks. We had a really good sense here of how you've arranged funding streams for the best of the participants. So now let's turn our attention to Lisa Dunaway, who's going to tell us about the experience on the ground at the local level in Anne Arundel, at the Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation. Lisa?
Hi, thanks for including me in today's webinar. I'm looking forward to talking to you about what we do here in Anne Arundel County. I love to talk about it. So just kind of, we're gonna go to the next slide. Sorry, just to kind of give you a little bit of background. Anne Arundel Workforce Development became a workforce employment network in 2013. Basically, when I say a workforce employment network, what that means is we're just like any other employment network, but we're tied directly with the workforce system. So we just are able to provide maybe a little bit more services, more resources than a normal employment network would be able to provide. And when I say the workforce system, I'm talking about what's created through our Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which is an act of Congress that was designed to strengthen our public workforce system. This legislation especially targets all the individuals that have significant barriers to employment. Individuals with disabilities being one of those populations. So WIOA is designed to provide access to employment, training, education, and other supports. And they're designed to be they're set so each participant is set up for success on their employment journey. The core partners that are mandated under the WIOA would be the Department of Labor, Maryland Department of Labor. They handle our Title, I can't think, 2, 3 services, I can't remember. And then of course, we handle our Title I. We have DOORS, and they handle the disability resources. And then we have Anne Arundel Community College, who handles our adult education and literacy programming. There are other agencies, other organizations, departments that are also required to be part of the partnership. They're not co-located at the American Job Center. Those 4 partners are, though. So next slide. When Anne Arundel Workforce Development first became an employment network back in 2013, we were still under WIA, which was the Workforce Investment Act. WIA didn't focus so much on the partnership piece, so we still kind of ran things separately. We didn't incorporate the employment network into our standard current programming. We ran it separately. It was very difficult for me to align my services with the rest of our programming. We did encourage the beneficiaries to enroll into the Maryland Workforce Exchange, which is the workforce website run by the Department of Labor, but it wasn't mandatory. They weren't required to do it. I worked one-on-one with my customers, and I did career exploration. I had, did all the resources, all the programming myself with them, connected them to employment and everything. I didn't really have support, and I wasn't really able to get them enrolled into other programs. Being internal within the agency or external within our community partners, it was just very difficult for me to do. One thing, when you become an employment network, initially you're not receiving funding from Social Security Administration. So all of the work that you're doing, you have to find other funding to allow for that work to be done. That's part of the reason why it was so difficult for me to connect to other like training funds and things like that. Now that we are established and we're working, the way they have it set up is you receive receive assistance, monetary assistance, once you get the person employed. Once they start to work and they actually meet milestones, then the agency, we start receiving money. So now that income that we're receiving, we're able to use it to support my salary so that we can continue this work, as well as some other operating expenses that we wouldn't be able to do normally. Next slide. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think, make sure I got everything on that one page. Can we go back really quick? I did miss a couple of things that I had to overcome, and that was really difficult for me, is because we were still being run separately, we were siloed. even though AAWDC was also the Title I provider, I just had that disconnect. I wasn't able to connect people for training opportunities or supportive services. And another obstacle, like I said, was that we weren't really able to align our resources with our community partners. So the next slide, where we enter in DEI, which was the Disability Employment Initiative. In 2016, Maryland applied to participate in this initiative, and they asked all the counties who wanted to also participate, who wanted to represent Maryland. So Anne Arundel County, along with Montgomery County, we stepped up to the plate and we agreed to deliver the services through DEI. DEI was designed to help knock down the silos that had been put up amongst all of the different agencies and organizations that were providing resources and services for individuals with disabilities. And it was also designed to open doors to allow more individuals with disabilities access to more of the intensive services offered through WIOA. Focus was placed to improve their education, training, and employment opportunities, and as well as their outcomes. The biggest change that occurred within our workforce employment network was that it became mandatory for all disability beneficiaries to be enrolled in WIOA. This was something that I had worked for the longest time, and it was something finally I was able to do. It made me so happy because this made them eligible to receive that funding for occupational training and supportive services that other organizations either didn't have or we had, but we weren't given it. So this opened that door for them. Another awesome takeaway from this project was we created integrated resource teams. This was another thing that I had been pushing for the longest time, and we finally were able to do it because I partnered with part of the DEI initiative was all of the disability agencies and organizations, the main ones in the state. We all partnered. They were all part of this. So they were mandating it down as well, that their local level staff was supposed to, the frontline staff was supposed to be working with us. So this really allowed us to create more open conversation and just relationships that just were not there in the past. So by creating these integrated resource teams, we were able to work more closely with the job seeker to identify their needs, what they were already receiving, who they were working with, and we brought us all to the table and we all talked, and we with their needs being paramount and the focus. And so we weren't duplicating our efforts. We weren't doing, wasting money. We were giving the customer, the job seeker, the best support that they could get. And this was great. It just made things so much easier. And at any time, those job seekers were able to utilize and access all the resources and funding that was available for them out there. And we also realized that by working together, we were setting ourselves up for success, because by helping them and helping each other, we were saving ourselves so much time and energies and effort. So it was just great. So next slide. And then it was mentioned before about Partnership Plus. This was another thing that I really wanted to work on, partnering with Doors, because they are our VR. It would make sense. We're located in the same building, that we work together. We support their consumers from day one. We get involved with them as soon as we can so that they have a relationship with us. They feel comfortable. They can come to us once they've gotten employment, because that's one thing with our VR services is once they're employed, after 90 days, they are exited out of VR services and then taken off the ticket to work roles. So this allows them to stay in ticket to work, stay with added support. We're able to support Doors with their retention needs because we're keeping in contact with the job seeker. We're not losing touch with them. We're also able to support them down the road. So if they want continued education or occupational credentialing, or even just to change jobs, we're there to help them, and they have that. We stay with them as long as we can until they're finally off the Ticket to Work books. And that occurs once they've, met the milestone that they've been off benefits for a certain amount of time. So, it's a win-win for everybody involved. Next. These are just some more of our, just kind of what I talked about already. So next slide. And finally, I wanted to include Mr. McGowan. We've had lots of success stories, so it was hard to pick, but actually not too hard because I've been working with him forever. And we're so proud of him, and he just graduated in May. So he started off with AAWDC back in 2016. He had attempted to go back to school a couple times. It just wasn't working out, but he knew he needed to change. He knew he wanted to, get off of benefits and all that good stuff. So somebody had told him about Ticket to Work, and he took a chance. So he came to us. Back then, I didn't have a lot to offer other than, my knowledge, my assistance. So I worked with him. We found ways to find him money so he could go to school. He applied, I helped him apply for financial aid. We're blessed with our community college will waive tuition for anybody who receives disability benefits. So he was just responsible for his books and his fees. So we were able to help him with that because I do have a little supportive service money back then. And I was just there for him and supported him through. We kept in touch with each other, and then he finally graduated from the community college, decided he might want to get his bachelor's degree. We talked about that. We worked on it, got him enrolled in a local college here, and he just graduated with his business administration degree, bachelor's degree. And he started working in February, which we helped him find that job as well. So he was just a win-win all the way around. And that's all.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was a great whirlwind tour. And before you go away, I'll have one question for you. We have so many questions, we won't have enough time, but since you're on stage, I want to ask you one that came up right as you were speaking. Why would an exit occur at 90 days when supported employment can be provided for up to 24 months? That was one of the last messages. Can you elaborate? Oh, you're on mute. No, still on mute. Sorry, you're still on mute. Let's make sure you get you unmuted. Seems to be very persistent in its muting.
There, I think I got it.
Oh, there
Did
we
it work?
go.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. That is probably a Doors question, or better answered by Doors, but my assumption would be that usually with supported employment, those individuals need a little more intensive services. And the individuals that I'm talking about don't. But maybe if you ask, is it Catherine? She might know better.
Yeah, does anyone else want to answer that question? And I have others.
So not knowing the specifics of the case, I can tell you that Doors will usually work with somebody till they reach stabilization, and then 90 days past stabilization. So that's typically around 135 days. But in supported employment, the assumption is somebody would have long-term funding behind them. So we're really working to get them stabilized, and then we're working to make sure that their long-term funding source, so it's a warm handoff, and that the funding is there for them to be successful.
Great, thank you. As I said, we have so many questions. I'll give you a really good one with lots of sub-questions to them. So this is the one, I think if you look at the Q&As, you'll still see it there as well from an anonymous attendee. The challenges for providers is working with state regs, deed regs, and accreditation regs. The systems have different billing handoffs. How do you handle that? How does Maryland handle the different billing schedules and the different regs?
So I'm not Sure, and maybe this is would be maybe even a follow-up conversation too. And I can speak to the public behavioral health side. Providers in Maryland that are licensed for supported employment, and this may go back to one of the other questions in here too. In order to be licensed for supported employment, providers now must have some type of accreditation. There's a list of accrediting bodies which are approved. One of those is CARF, of course, but I'm not sure if I completely understand the entire question around billing, et cetera, because CARF really does not sort of dictate the funding process, but more the service delivery. So there could be additional information regarding that, but in Maryland, for the public behavioral health side, we have a very streamlined sort of funding process, which is not dictated necessarily by the accrediting bodies, and the accrediting bodies are that's the requirement for the licensed supported employment providers.
So from a VR perspective, I can tell you that this has been an ongoing struggle for years. And in many ways, we worked it out with BHA, as you could see in our braided mechanism. But we're still working on this with our Developmental Disability Administration. That has been a topic that we've been discussing for years. One of the struggles that we've had overall is that the regulatory requirements that we discussed in our presentation, we're required to collect so much information when we spend our money on the person, we spend it on the services that were provided. And so for some of our other funders like DDA or BHA, they don't necessarily require that level of detail. So we have struggled with that, and I'm not so sure the overall answer to that, except I feel like we've been really successful in the behavioral health area, where we have been able to really collaborate and coordinate information and our funding process.
And as Kate said, some of that is that collaborative discussion as those things arise. We talked about the challenges of different systems. I see really quick, the other part of that question I'm seeing is around, does Maryland allow sub-minimum wage work? And in Maryland, that is not something that's allowable or reimbursable.
Yeah, this is good. I'm glad you were able to clarify that. Here's one other question that I think we have time for a very brief answer, though. The question about how to apply what they've learned to their state, and in particular, the question about whether all individuals are connected to the employee network in your case. Is everyone connected to that network, or is there a subset?
So, and thinking you may be talking about in terms of, are all supported employment providers connected to the Maryland Employment Network? It is an optional program. So some supported employment providers have chosen to be partners with the Maryland Employment Network, which serves in this capacity as an administrative employment network. And there's a lot more detail than we would have time to talk about today, but I'm happy to have any follow-up conversations about how that is set up and how that works. But it is optional for providers to participate. And in addition to that, if individuals are receiving service from a particular supported employment provider that is not a partner with the administrative employment network, the individuals continue to have access to the employment network services directly.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And I'm sorry we don't have more time for more of the answers to these questions that have come in, but I do want to take the opportunity to introduce one more speaker who's going to give us her closing remarks. If we could go to the next slide, please. We're particularly pleased to welcome now to the virtual stage of our webinar, Carol Beatty, Secretary of Disabilities at the Maryland Department of Disabilities. Secretary Beatty was appointed to this position by Governor Hogan in 2015. And for most of her professional life, she has been involved in supporting people with developmental disabilities. Prior to her current role, she was a longtime executive director of the ARC of Howard County. So Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here today to bask in the great work that Maryland is doing and all my colleagues are doing. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank them all. Their presentations were really important and informative, and this is a great topic for discussion. For me, the takeaway points have been that it's really necessary to collaborate, and that collaboration needs to be founded on relationship building. The Maryland Department of Disabilities is the only cabinet level Department of Disabilities in the United States, which represents all disabilities and is focused on cross-disability and cross-agency policy development. We focus on policies which improve the delivery of services to individuals with disabilities and work with all the state agencies, county governments, and municipality partners. We work collaboratively with these agencies and departments that are represented here today, and more to ensure that Marylanders with disabilities have equal access, opportunity, and choice in all aspects of their lives. The initiatives that were mentioned here today are examples of how our department works in partnership with other agencies. Our Employment Policy Director, Jade Gingrich, is a nationally recognized subject matter expert in K-12 and post-secondary transition and employment. And she has been an integral part of the development of these initiatives and strategies, working side by side with the Governor's Workforce Development Board, the Division of Rehabilitation Services, the Department of Labor, and Early Intervention and Special Education under the Maryland Department of Education. Our work is guided by the State Disability Plan, which is a 3-year plan which sets performance goals for all state agencies in Maryland that serve people with disabilities. Although our department is tasked with coordinating the creation of the plan and annually monitoring it, it is a state plan. It is our state plan. So the plan not only ensures compliance with state and federal laws and essentially functions as our Olmstead plan, but sets goals for the provision of state services in an accessible way that allows people with disabilities to have equal opportunity for choice and access. We've linked our latest plan on the next slide. So if you could move to the next slide, there you go. And thank you for allowing us to highlight the tremendous progress that comes from building relationships, breaking down silos, and working together in partnership.
Thank you so much, Secretary Beatty. Really appreciate your being here with us on this important topic. If we could, so note here the link to the MOU that was mentioned earlier. And if we can go to the next slide. Also, another resource that you can access is the webinar that we've mentioned earlier, the March webinar, which gives another couple of states examples. And on the next slide, I'll mention the next event that is coming up, which is essentially a follow-up to both of these webinars, a Q&A chat with the field. And honestly, we could populate it with questions just from this session. And we'll be able to get some answers to those questions as well, both the ones that have already been asked and the ones that you may have as a result of this session or in between. So mark your calendars for that. And then let's go to the next slide. Of course, we encourage you to stay involved, sign up for the newsletter for notifications about these events and other events on the Lead Center website. And also feel free to connect with us on our social media channels that are listed next. And all that's left for me to do is to thank the behind the scenes team that made this session possible, folks arranging for the captioning, for the managing the questions, for setting up the webinar and all of that. There's a whole team behind the scenes that made this possible. Thank you again to our fabulous panelists. We will continue to process these questions that have come in. And again, mark your calendars for August 11th for the Q&A session. And that closes our session right on time at 1 p.m. over here on the West Coast, and wherever you are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us today.